Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. This is going to be one of those episodes, Wendy, I think that it's going to really resonate with a lot of folks and be something that we refer back to. Bofta Yimam coming to us with all of her wisdom, founder of StoryLede. And we're talking about LinkedIn and how to use it and why to use it. Bofta, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Wendy, Julia, for having me on. We're gonna have fun talking about this. I'm excited.
I'm very excited because I think I'm going to learn a lot from you, and I can't wait to dig in. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I think it's going to be one of those things that a lot of us are maybe somewhat shocked by what we hear.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. This platform has changed a lot, even in like 3 years.
Yeah. And it's an ongoing dialogue that we have to have. So I am so excited about this notebook ready. And it's only possible for us to be able to do anything that we're doing because of our presenting sponsors. And they're Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, JMT Consulting, and of course, Interim Executives Academy. Without them, this is not possible. So thank you so much. And I, today, am happy to be able to co-host Wendy F. Adams with Cultivate for Good, with Julia C. Patrick of the American Nonprofit Academy. With Bofta, we are going to have so much fun. That is why we do what we do as co-hosts with the Nonprofit Show. Thank you so much, ladies. Let's jump in. Bofta, tell us about what it is that you are doing as founder with StoryLede.
Well, thanks again for having me on, guys. And look, StoryLede is all about, as you can guess, storytelling. And so we really, my background being in broadcast TV, ask nonprofit leaders, for-profit leaders to ask themselves the question, what's your lead story? What's the story that you're running with? Just like in news, when we used to grab our coffee and be around the table at 9 a.m. as reporters and news directors were asking us, what is going to be the lead story? And so we just ask business owners to really take onus and empower themselves to think about what's the narrative that you want to run with? And then how are you crafting that message and that story so it's in alignment and consistent across platforms like LinkedIn and your content, to your website, to your presentation decks for donors or funders that you're looking to attract, to the conversations that you're having in your sales calls. How are you staying in alignment with that story and that really compelling message?
Mm-hmm. I love that because it seems to me that those that understand this concept are the ones that move ahead in the nonprofit sector. And we estimate that there are 1.8 million registered nonprofits. And honestly, there are groups that just get it right, that do amazing things, no matter what their service area is, right, Wendy? But if they get this piece down, they're attracting attention.
Well, Bofta said it so well. It's alignment right from the beginning. If we're saying, we capture that why, that's the lead, and then we have a consistent in messaging across all of those platforms, LinkedIn, of course, just being one of them, but we're going to dive into that today. That is what keeps people coming back for more.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And the power of LinkedIn specifically is what we're going to really be talking about today. And the power of donor engagement. I don't feel like a lot of us understand that there's a connection here available to us for donors. Talk to us about what you think that looks like, Bofta.
Well, I think one thing that's really underestimated in marketing is likability. And likability really matters when you are a nonprofit leader. So if you're hiding, you're not even likable, right? Because we don't know you, right? One could say. So we don't know you. We can't like you because we don't know you. There's no trust, there's no authority, and so forth. And what you're really looking to do in your marketing is to build a brand that you can say that you're proud of, and that there's a likability. You like what they're saying, or maybe you don't like what they're saying, but maybe that person's not your particular audience. Then you're not really shooting for them, right? So your target audience, what you're building is, what are the values around this person? What's connecting the dots and resonating for so many members of the audience? And so, like I said, likability is not something people want to talk about, because then they think, oh, I've got to do this. I've got to, maybe wear makeup, but I don't wear makeup. I'm not talking about those kinds of superficial things. I'm talking about liking who you are at your very core. And
Mhm.
the real truth is that so often nonprofit leaders are hiding their core for whatever
Mm.
reason. Oh, so and so is going to think this way, or I don't have a compelling story, or I took over 5 years ago from so and so. And so really it's their organization, not mine. And they're right. There's so many stories we could buy into, but these are bottom line. And I want to be clear, Wendy and Juliet, these are excuses. These are excuses to play small. And so it gives a
Wow.
reason to stay on the sidelines and not get in the visibility game. Those
Mhm.
nonprofit leaders who we work with, some who we don't work with, we just observe, the ones who have owned their story, they just decided that the vision was more important than their ego about who was going to like them. The vision of like what they want to do with the organization was just so much bigger. So when you talk about donors, and that's what everyone's like listening in for, right? So the donors are looking for, wow, this person has really got a hold of their voice. They really own who they are. We really like what they're representing and the change they want to create. We want to find a way to support this type of action because we understand how the dots are connecting. They're
Mhm.
not just throwing out content or reposting and resharing because they woke up on a Wednesday morning and they said, oh my gosh, I haven't posted lately, which who hasn't done that, right? And so somebody will say, oh, I've got to repost and reshare, but that's not the same as creating thought leadership and connecting the dots with your story.
Okay, so you said something really interesting, and I want to back up just a little bit because we don't often hear this in the nonprofit
Mm-hmm.
sector when we talk about marketing, or just we don't hear it. And that is that not everybody is going to love your mission, and that's okay. But
I knew you were going to go there.
yeah, I mean, Wendy, isn't that true? We're kind of
Yeah.
like taught
Yes.
everybody has to love you, and if one person doesn't align, then you got to navigate towards that, right? I love that you're giving us permission to say, build a tribe that really
Yeah.
loves and supports you, and then work that tribe. I mean,
But you're
that's what
saying
I
they
heard.
have
Work
to know
that tribe. I
you.
think that's a great
They have to
phrase.
know you to connect there.
Yeah, yeah. It's very,
Yeah.
I mean,
So
that's
it's like you
cool.
want to build community, but you're not willing to get out there.
Exactly. Exactly. I think, you said something else that really like rang my bell, and that is there's a lot of fear. And we're afraid to like piss off our
Oh yeah.
donors, frankly, or, oh, we don't want to
Oh
upset
yeah.
them. And so I love that you said that. I also want to move on to something that is something else I think you're going to rock my world, because you talk about differentiating ourselves from our nonprofit competitive set. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
another thing that we're afraid to say, that we have
Yeah.
competitors because that's only for profit. But that's not true. Talk to us about that.
Well, somebody's getting the bag, right? I mean, somebody's getting the monies, somebody's getting something. So you have competition, maybe not in your exact specific niche, but somebody who may give to you is deciding to give to somebody else, right? And or they're volunteering for somebody else. It doesn't always have to be about money, right? So it's a lot of things that people are doing where they're spreading the word more. They're they're making sure that email that you sent goes to so and so, right? Because they really like you, that kind of thing. They believe in your message. So I think that one of the things that's really important here is that they understand that their story is going to help set them apart. And so a lot of times there's a struggle in, how am I going to tell the same story? Or I don't
Mhm.
have a story that directly connects to the mission. You can find a way to connect the dots over and over and over again. The problem is that we often think that being visible is just talking about an award we received. And there's nothing knocking an award, right? Accolades, celebratory things. Those are going to get you likes, right? And engagement. But for true thought leadership and storytelling, you want to be able to, you want to go back to connecting the dots. And so often there's hiding that thread in that story that's going to actually resonate with your audience, and then doing it in an authentic way, not in a
Mhm.
slime ball way. And I think you can do that if you periodically are reminding the audience about how you got there. Actually, I did that this morning. So I have to practice what I preach, right? And so there are some people who are new eyeballs to my content, and so I have to remind them, how did I get here and who am I? And in doing so, I'm building that trust and that credibility and authority, because I cannot take for granted that everyone who comes through my platform, through LinkedIn, whatever it might be, IG, whatever it might be, knows who I am and what I'm doing right now. Because oftentimes, right, we evolve, we change. There's different things that we're supporting. There's different things that we're about, right? And so I'm in a business owner time of my life, but I wasn't, 5 seasons ago. Okay. And so there's different things that happen in our lives. And I think when we remind people without throwing up on them and telling them everything, we get to pick and choose. But I go back to what are the compelling threads? And I want to give a tip to your audience, because I think sometimes as a speaker, we can get on here and we can talk about things without giving real tips. I want everyone to think about transformational moments. So those of you who are saying, I cannot connect the dots for my story, this is a very quick exercise. Just think about when you went from this to that. And weight loss, it's easy because we always think like I went from, this amount of weight to this amount of weight, but it's very effective because it's quick and it's sharp and it tells the transformation. So if you can write down 10 transformational moments when you went from this to that. So I went from making $15,000 a year in my first reporting job to making $15,000 for 15 minutes in a speaking gig 20 years later. 15 years later, whatever, the time frame was, I can't remember. But those kinds of transformations remind people, and then you tell them a little bit more, right? You finish the sentence, but those kinds of transformations help us create what are my powerful stories, because people care about transformation. And I'll say that over and over again. People want to know transformation. They want to know how you got here and why you care so much.
And that's where the impact is. That's where the hook is, right? That's what keeps them coming back for more. I'm being coached in the same space as it relates to, Wendy, let people see a little bit more of who you are behind the scenes. So that, and that's the place that I'm recognizing people actually want that. You think, no, they just want the business. No, they want to know the human behind. Yeah,
absolutely. They want to know pieces of your journey. They want to know, maybe a time where you struggled, that you were honestly struggled. And sometimes we don't want to talk about how we've struggled. Sometimes people don't want to, air so much, right? Oh, we were in debt for 5 years before we came out. People don't want to talk about that. And I get that. So I tell people, it's your story and you get to own it, but you've got to go there. You've got to go someplace that's going to help people understand that you're a human being. And that what that does when you do it right, and you are able to share a lesson coming out of some of these content pieces, or you're able to share how this shapes your values or how you run your team, right? You bring it to present day, it helps people connect the dots. So it helps people understand who you are. And then that brings them to say, oh, I want to support this person. I really understand them. Or I don't really want to support them, but I know this person is all about that and they may want to. And so you just open yourself up to conversations. And here's what I tell people is when you start to get in the LinkedIn game, and you post consistently and you post compelling content, you do not know where it can take you. It can bring you, as for one of our clients, $1 million Q4 dropping. We've got an extra $1 million, literally, that happened with one of our clients. It can bring you to a speaking engagement in London. You just don't know where it can take you. It can take you to your greatest partnership that will last you for the next 10 years. So underestimating the platform is the biggest mistake you can make right now.
So I love this because I'm thinking about my work and my business and my ability to use this platform, which is woefully underperforming. So I'm really interested in this because I feel like, Bofta, there's a sense of how personal do we get versus how personal do we get on behalf of our organization, right? And that's like this is like a line. I mean, Wendy and I are both in business for ourselves, and so who we are is a direct reflection of what our business is, right? But can you help guide us a little bit? Because sometimes, frankly, I look on LinkedIn and I'm like, whoa, you shouldn't have said that. That's like too personal or that's too political. And I find myself backing away. So what do you see, Bofta, about that? Like, how do we think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So here's what I recommend even to our clients when they get stuck is to think about themes. What are the themes that 5 themes that I want to carry in my content throughout 2025? So what that could look like, Julia, is empowerment. So then you can start to think of stories of empowerment versus a story where you're feeling some embarrassment or shame around, right? So if you think of empowerment, if you think of resilience, so what are themes that you feel reflect you and or your business? Same with you, Wendy. And so then you can say, oh, that was a story that really reflected empowerment. Because that's what the lesson came out of that, versus thinking I have to come up with all of these stories, which is very overwhelming. So I'm almost saying reverse it, as Missy Elliott said, flip it and reverse it. Okay, so flip it and reverse it, and think about okay, let's think about the themes that would really resonate with my target audience, but that resonate with me too. And that type of when you embody that, a theme for a season or a month, when you embody that, it can be easier sometimes to cultivate stories, because then you can think of times financial empowerment, relationship empowerment, team empowerment. What are some of the things you do? And then you'll say, oh, the way we start our team call every time. Our team call starts like this, or we wrap up our team call like this. This really embodies a value that we have in this. You'll start to think of them because you're thinking of that theme. And you should ask members of your team, or you guys are friends, you two should talk and say, wait, what do you find empowering? Well, the time you invited me on that show, I was so nervous to get on for the first time, and you really empowered me. So you can start to think of themes, and that's just what I'm kind of coming up with thin air here, right? As we're jamming, but that's an example. Does that help you, Julia?
It's really interesting because Wendy, I'm curious to hear what you have to say, because I can totally see that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you just reframed, Bofta, the whole I'm embarrassed to, is that too personal?
Yeah.
We're reframing and calling it something different. That's being vulnerable. Vulnerable does not mean embarrassing, but I think we have made those synonymous, right? But letting people know this is who I am, and I love that you made the tie, not having to create this content that's not me for an audience or for the audience, but for both. Right? I now can speak out who I am. The audience gets to have that interaction and engagement, gets to see a little bit deeper, which is going to, again, I think it brings to the place of, well, tell me more about that. We don't have to do verbal vomit, but now you've opened that opportunity to say, I want to lean in and see the next post. And you also hit on consistency, right? That they're there so that you're coming back. I love it. I am taking so many. I really just want to scribble.
Look, scribble away. The other thing I want to jam on real quick, but when it comes to LinkedIn, because I want to respect everyone's time, is that's really important, is that we don't sell in every post. If you're building trust, credibility, storytelling, thought leadership, guess what? You don't have to sell. You don't have to say, like, at our organization, we do this at every single post. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see that people think they need to do. Well, we need to bring in our organization. Trust me, people understand after a while who you are and what organization you're with, right? You don't have to keep saying it. The other thing is that a lot of people wonder, and I want to go back to this, Julia. It's like, well, how often do we post? We talked about that in the green room. I think it's an important point. How often do we post? So often, no one is seeing your posts, because LinkedIn doesn't promote posts all the time. It really depends on how much engagement you're getting within that first hour. So if you have team members, tell them to hop on within that first 30 minutes of posting and say more than 5 to 7 words, around 5 to 7 words, more than a thank you, more than great job. Give some substance inside of that comment. That's going to help your post. Your audience, unless it's a really good post, maybe sees 10% of what you're posting. So a lot of people were wondering, am I posting too much? I'm like, you're probably not posting enough. So definitely do 3 days a week. 3 days a week, I think, is a good one. And then if a post is getting a lot of traction, don't interrupt it. Some people will try to do double posting, like I'll post now and then in 4 hours I post again. But if that post was doing good, that original post, you just heard it because you interrupted the algorithms. And I didn't make this stuff up. This is just LinkedIn and how it operates, right? I don't have any control over it. But I think it's important for people to know, when you've got great content working, what you need to do is make sure you're liking and commenting and engaging on the platform, on your post and on your potential donors posts. You need to be out there with referral partners, posting and engaging, their content. So supporting others. We forget it's a social platform. Right. So LinkedIn wants to see, who's engaging. It's also really good if you do a little warm up before you post. So I know we don't always have time for it, but make time, be intentional about going in about 20 minutes before you post and making sure that you're engaging on the people you want to engage with, donors for your audience, and make sure that you're going in and you're engaging with their content before you post. That's
Okay,
underrated.
that is magical because
Right?
I think I do the opposite. I think that I'm like I think of my posts as like a task, right? And so I like have, it's on my to-do list. And so I
Mhm.
task it, I do it. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, I have some extra time. And then I go back in. I love what you just said. To me, Bofta, that's a game changer.
Game changer. Yeah, game changer. So really you want to give yourself a little extra time, Julia, which I know time is of the essence for everyone, but ideally you're warming up the algorithms. Think of it that way. You're giving a little warm up. And
Well, you're
so
bringing the relational component in. That's
you're,
exactly what you're right.
yes, yes, and you're helping them see your content.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are posting amazing content, but nobody's seeing it because they're not doing some of these other things. The other thing people aren't doing is really focusing on the first 200, I believe it's 200, 220 characters in your
Mm.
lead. So the very first 200 characters, and you guys are pros, so you may know this, but there's a little read more drop down that
Mhm.
LinkedIn has. And if you don't have a compelling hook at the start of your post, LinkedIn is paying attention to how many people are actually clicking that read more. And so you could have great content in the bottom half of your post, but if the top isn't hot, then no one's clicking read more. It's not going to it's not going to get boosted. So we really look at, and my whole team is full of writers. So I'm always looking at, okay, but is that going to hook them in? And did you connect the dots with the image, that whether it's a graphic or a photo or a video, how are you connecting the dots? So
Mhm.
that when people see that first 200 characters, they feel compelled to click read more. You get more eyeballs on your post. LinkedIn promotes it, and it's a win.
Some
Okay,
things don't change. You just said above the fold. That's what we
above
just
the
heard.
fold.
Right, right. Yeah, right.
Right.
We need to get to the point fast, folks, or you need to tease and have a great teaser. And
Mhm.
so sometimes you're not telling them the full thing, but you might want to say a hook that's going to tease them so they want to read more. And so a lot of this just comes down to writing. And I understand everyone's not a professional writer, which is why we're here, and other agencies are there too to help support you. But these are things that people should be mindful of when they are thinking about, how do I get more visible?
So, Bofta, let me ask you one technical question aligned to that. I feel like there are a lot of folks that go on in the morning while they're getting situated, drinking their coffee, and they just go through and like everything, and they never
Here's my coffee.
comment. Yeah, I know. Right here, me too. Um,
And
is
they
that
never comment.
yeah? What do you? How do you? My
You're
sense
not
of
going
it
to
is
get the
like
max. You're not going to
it
get the
will.
maximum out of the platform. You can like all you want. What LinkedIn wants is engagement. They want you to. That might help you a little bit, to an extent. Obviously, this also depends on how many followers you have. You may already be somebody who has a large following, so anything you do is kind of rewarded by the platform. But that's very few and
Mm.
far between. I would
Mhm.
say that for most people, if you're going to go through the trouble of liking a post, just
Mhm.
engage with the person too, and you might have some fun doing it. I like to think of it as like, just have fun doing it. And what's smart is to have a list of maybe 50 for nonprofit leaders who may be overwhelmed in this conversation. Have your list of 50 prospects that you want to engage with more on LinkedIn. Create that list and get to work both by doing the content, but making sure you're engaging with them too, because you don't want to engage with them and then not make the most of it by having poor content that doesn't sing, content that's not compelling. And we've seen in our work with working with nonprofit leaders, once we really connect the dots and get the message going, they are overwhelmed with support,
Mm.
invites, donors that are coming their way. And it seems like it's happened magically. Like, oh my gosh, wow, this just came through. I'm like, well, you've been consistent for 6 months or 9 months or a year. This isn't magically coming to you. I believe it's all of the energy that they put into showing up on our calls, making sure we have the content, and just being super intentional. So I think if we had to boil it down, Julie and Wendy, most people just aren't intentional on the platform. It's let me repost, reshare this. Oh my gosh, I haven't posted this week. Post that award I got, right? It's very haphazard, it's just very casual. So then they wonder when they're not getting enough out of it. You've got to think and sit down and say, what am I missing here? Do I need to inspire my audience? Like, what are things that have also worked? Like, my posts tend to do really well when I inspire, not business talk, right? And that's for most of us. Business talk doesn't, do this and do that, doesn't get anywhere, right? Telling people what they should and shouldn't do, but inspiring someone and then offering some value and tips, that goes a long way. And I think there's something to be said for that.
So as an Emmy award-winning journalist, broadcaster, I mean, you've lived in the visual world, the visual medium. Do you feel like you should be leading your posts and leading your mentality with the visual aspect and then narrative second? Or do you believe narrative?
I think it's a happy marriage. I think it's a happy marriage. I think you've got to do both. I think you've got to do both. You've got to be really aware of what the visual is. And sometimes I tell people, if you are doing this on your own, which I understand, you may be a startup, I say go in your phone and start looking at photos for inspo. Like, what are photos that you could tie to a story and a lesson? Just because I know that not everyone has the resources to, they're starting a startup, they're passionate about it, they're not ready to invest. I say, well, there's a lot of stories inside of your phone. If you can take the time to go through and think about the visual component and tie it to a message and a lesson that you believe in, that would help your audience. Just start there. Very simple, right? If we're going, just keeping it simple. But I think that for those who we are working with and who have typically a little bit more seasoned nonprofits, they're not startups. What I would say is what we really work to do is what are visual components that can support this story. So sometimes we're writing a story because we've talked to them about it on a call, and then a member of my team will say, well, we suggest this kind of photo to go with this. Sometimes we can create a graphic. Sometimes they already have videos that they're supplying us. So it does depend, but I do say it's a happy marriage. You do want to think of both the visual and the written content. Here's what else I will say, again, for the startups, because I know that there's a wide swath here listening to this. For the startups, I think it's important that you think of your journey and how you can start capturing moments of your journey in your everyday life. Just take photos, just take some visuals, and that will start to inspire you to think about you writing things to that. But keep in mind that you want variety. You don't want every post to be the same type of theme. So you want to be thinking of, okay, I want to educate my audience one day. Really, I want to give them maybe a carousel, which is multi-page PDF, another day of really tips they can run with. I want to give another day that's more inspirational. I want to do another day that's more personal story with a message. So variety is also the spice, which is why this can be hard and cumbersome for a lot of leaders, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to think about usually. So it can be tricky. It can be tricky to do it all.
It's a lot of work, but Wendy, I feel like it's not a lot of work if it's working.
Well, right? That's it. That's exactly it. When you see the benefits, when you see what comes from it, and the questions you then start to have asked of you, right? Because the engagement changes once we move, and that's what you're saying, move from that surface, and you just start to get into that depth, that now it's not as much work, because now it's a conversation, not just putting out content, but now you're conversing. Love it.
Well, right. And I want to be clear too, Wendy and Julia, we want our clients to ROI. Okay. Right. Like, yes, we want you to be liked. We want you to have engagement. We also want you to ROI. So we're looking at this from a business lens and from a strategy lens. And it's very easy for us to have multi-year engagements, because people realize it is hard to replace a one-stop shop agency. Like, it's hard to replace that because all the work is being done for you. We literally just say, show up on the calls, answer our emails. All right. The rest is really done for you because we are ghostwriting. We are writing it to your tone, to your message, to, all of the things that we've been putting into. So it's hard to find that intimate relationship and find people who are going to execute it right. And so we take a lot of pride in that. We're not a huge agency. We have the ability to really work intimately with our clients. And that's what I think has led to a lot of our success, because we really want them to win. We're like, okay, this posted really well. Did you notice this? Did you notice that? Are you engaging with people? Are you adding new eyeballs? Another thing underestimated. If you are looking to grow your business, you have, in marketing, period, you've got to add eyeballs, new eyeballs. So you go in the search function of LinkedIn, look up the title of those who you want to target, and you start adding those second connections. And that happens every week. You got to be deliberate and intentional about adding new eyeballs. Otherwise, you're talking to the same audience all the time. And guess what? Audience fatigue is a real thing.
It
Real
is,
thing.
absolutely. Well, this has been riveting. I mean, Bofta Yimam, I have really enjoyed this. I love your energy. I love the
Thank you.
trajectory of your life experience that has led you through this, and really, really interesting. You can learn more about Bofta Yimam and her team at StoryLede. Visit StoryLede, and it's LEDE.com. And you can learn more about her work and what she's done, and how valued she's been within the communications community. Really, really interesting. I love, both to have
Thank you.
somebody who's been on the other side of the camera working in the sector to help us understand this. It's really powerful. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank
We
you so
really
much
You
for
do.
know,
having me.
this has been amazing. We call Kevin Oz. He might have just lost his title. Both that you brought it today.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, our executive producer is not going to like that, but I think it's
Mm-mm. No.
kind of right. You're kind of right. It's
Oh,
really been
no.
fun. Hey, you know, it's also really fun is we get to come on every day because we have these amazing partners. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. These are the folks that support us day in and day out. We're now in year 6, coming up on our 1300th episode. So
Whew.
it's really an amazing journey that these folks support. So I want to make sure that we call them out. As we like to end each and every episode of the Nonprofit Show, we end with this message. It's simple, but it's kind of hard too. And that is to stay well so you can do well. Thank you, ladies.